Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar organized by Project StaSIO. So first, I would like to introduce our speaker. Kate Bren is a performance consultant at Cyclone Energy Group. She translates technical building science principles into actionable steps on high-performing projects of all scales. Kate complements her own analysis with compelling visualizations and stories. Before joining Cyclone, Kate led the high-performance building department at Positive Energy and consulted with single-family residential clients on resiliency, passive design, and mechanical systems. Kate is an Austin, Texas resident and a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin with a bachelor degrees in architecture and architectural engineering. She is an EIT and an appointed member of Austin's Resource Management Commission. Now let's welcome Kate.
All right, can you guys see everything?
Yep. Yes.
Great. Okay, yeah, welcome. Thanks for having me. So yeah, today we'll be talking about communication and illustration with Google Slides. First things first, this is an AIA continuing education credit. So if you are looking for credit, you should fill out this QR code, and I'll also, oh, it doesn't look like I can post a chat, never mind. So yeah, just scan this QR code real quick with your phone, give me your name and email, and so we can get you signed up for that credit. I'll give you guys a few seconds to do that. All right, I'll move on and happy to go back to that later if needed. So here's what we'll be talking about today. So first I'll give an introduction, a bit about why I think graphics matter and visual communication matters, and kind of what role it plays in our jobs. Then we'll look at some case studies of work that I've done that I consider successful, and then talk a little bit about why Google Slides is an important tool to use. And then I will show a few demonstrations of how to put together some illustrations in Google Slides. So next up, we'll talk about just the introduction. I'd love to hear a bit from you guys first. So again, I'd love for you to get out your phones and join this poll that we're putting on. So you can scan the QR code or join using this link here, typing in AREVAEI 900. And then this first question that I'll ask you is, what is your role? So are you an architect, engineer, consultant, student or professor, or something else? Cool. So lots of engineers in the room. Me too. I will be a professional engineer right now. I'm an EIT, and I'm also a consultant, as was mentioned previously, and at Cyclone Energy Group. Next, I'm curious to hear what you guys like to use for presentations and graphics now. So some that come to mind for me are like Google Slides, or maybe Power BI, InDesign, Canva, that's a good one. Yeah, so just curious to hear what you guys like to use already. Okay, so yeah, lots of Power BI users in the room. Neat. Tableau, that's a good one. Okay, great. I'll move on. So lastly, curious how familiar we are with Google Slides. Seems like some of us are relatively familiar, some of us not so much. So maybe you've had an introduction to it, but you don't use it every day. It seems like most folks, or yeah, got some regular users in the room too. So hopefully this presentation will be appealing to a wide variety of y'all. All right, so here's a little bit about me. From the kind of graphic design standpoint, both my parents were graphic designers. So when I was born, I I was very much in the world of graphic design already. Next up, I went to school at University of Texas at Austin. I studied architecture and engineering, and I've got the little handshake because in my mind that's kind of where the art and the graphic design meets the technical skills that I now have. I was introduced to building performance simulation tools through an internship that I did at EYP, which is now Page. Next up, I had a job at Positive Energy where we focused on early phase design. This is where we looked at thermal comfort and solar radiation and daylight in a home in New Mexico. Again, pursuing my engineering license, and now I am at Cyclone Energy Group. And so that's how I got started. All right, so moving on to kind of why we want to focus on digital communication. So in your work, you may be familiar with this kind of workflow. You do a ton of work, maybe for weeks, maybe for months, and then you have an hour-long meeting to present it to your client. So it's really difficult to figure out what it is that will go into that 1 hour meeting. So the tendency I think that we have had and that I've seen other consultants have is try to establish trust by saying, look at all this work that we did. And that can be good, and trust is a good thing certainly, but the client may not understand what it is that you're trying to communicate to them. Another thing that can happen when you're doing analysis is that you spend so much time doing the analysis, but not a lot of time trying to put together the client-facing deliverable. And so maybe there's not a lot of thought into what's going into that deliverable. So a better outcome might be a kind of intentional approach to looking at your work. So telling the client something along the lines of, here are 3 of the best options from our case studies, and then maybe that's actionable information for the client. I've been in lots of these client-facing meetings, some that have gone well and some that haven't. There are a lot of things that are outside of your control when you're in a client-facing meeting. That what is in your control is what information you tell your client and how it's being related. So those are the skills that we can try to hone in on this call. So here are a few tools in my toolbox that we can walk through in these case studies, and moving on to talk about how to improve your visual communication skills. All right, so let's jump into some case studies. Here's a slide that we used for a multifamily high-rise in Chicago, and we were looking at different ways that they could improve their efficiency in the building. So this is a retrofit, and so we tested out 50 different environmental conservation measures and ranked them kind of from the lowest, the best EUI, so the best energy use index, to the worst, which is on the far right. And then the existing is this brown column on the left. And in this slide, I think it's really successful because we're showing that even though all of these different things are an option, only some of them are really going to produce a meaningful impact on the building's energy efficiency. So I'll use this slide to talk about hierarchy. Text size can help emphasize different categories and demonstrate to the person that you're showing the presentation to what is important. Text color can, in this case, help de-emphasize information. So these are captions that aren't as relevant to your understanding of the image, but if you want to know more, you can read the gray text. Grouping. In this case, we're using grouping to identify measures that are similar. So these far left images, or these far left groups, are combinations of measures, and we're going to mechanical only combinations, mechanical single systems. So all these different colors essentially signal some sort of change. And you can also see that the colors signal as well that the amount of effectiveness of the measure is changing. Annotations are a good way to focus the viewer's frame of reference for what they're looking at in the image, and to help them understand what you want to tell, what the story is. All right, next, we'll look at categorization. So this is a slide that we put together to talk about the 2023 Energy Code updates that were relevant to Chicago and, of course, around the country as well, but we included some Chicago amendments here. And this is for an architecture firm. So we focused on a few different categories, and the main reason that categorization is important here is because we said that, even though thermal envelope is an important category the architects should consider, there are also a few other categories that are relevant when you're designing your building that should be considered throughout the design process. Okay, so categorization here is shown in a few different ways. The first is through these subheadings. So these signal that there are several different categories that we want to talk about. Lines are also helpful in terms of categorization to just distinguish between these different things that we're talking about and create boundaries between them. And lastly, color. Thermal envelope is sort of a chunky term, but if you want to instead refer to this category as the bright orange or red category on top, that might be a way that brings your client in and helps them to familiarize themselves with what you're looking at. All right, next. This is a slide where we were looking at 4 different options for a new multifamily high-rise in Chicago. And we wanted to show them that each of these options have distinct impacts on energy efficiency of the building and utility costs and the different cooling and heating plant sizes. I'll use this slide to talk about color. I think color is really successful here because it demonstrates relationships between each of these different scenarios, and it helps break up the text. Here, color is being used to link the description text to the image. So this toilet is this light blue color, sanitary recovery is this light blue color as well. So you can relate those 2 things together. Consistency is also established via color in this example. So on the left side of the image, we're using boilers in a red color, and then on the right side, we're using heat pumps in cool colors. And so here we're saying that anything that's natural gas fired is using warm tones, and anything that's electrified is using cooler tones. So that signals a change, even though we're not explicitly saying that on this page. And lastly, color is being used to break up the slides. So the colors here don't relate to either the images above or the text below, but what they do is help signal that there's other information to be understood, and that information is equally important because it's colorful. All right, next. Let's jump into talking about illustration. So this slide is pretty educational, and that was the main intent. It was to demonstrate to the client that becoming net zero carbon involves both accounting and subtracting any sort of positive impacts, and then achieving the goal ultimately of net zero carbon. And in this image, the illustration helps familiarize the client and bring them in. All right, so carbon sequestration is a topic that your client may not be familiar with, but they may be familiar with this net, and they can understand that, the net capturing carbon has something to do with carbon sequestration, so you're bringing them in. You can also establish relationships with illustrations. So these 3 distinct factors all have this carbon CO2 cloud with them, and that conveys that all of these objects are a source of carbon to consider and to account for. And then lastly, using these math symbols to relate all of these different components together and use symbols that are pretty familiar to your audience. All right, so next let's talk about why I like to use Google Slides for all of this stuff. Google Slides is free. I do think your business may need Google Slides to use it if you want to share stuff back and forth, for example, but it's free for using just the interface itself. It also makes it really easy to collaborate and document, so you can write comments to each other. You can link graphs in from Google Sheets, so you can do pretty much everything you need to do in the Google Suite. One thing that I think is important to point out here is that I have always been in Google Slides. I started using it in college, and then started using it at my first job, and now I've converted Cyclone to be using it as well. So I am in Google Sheets and Google Slides on a daily basis, and am able to do everything I need to do there as opposed to using Excel or any other tool. It's pretty user friendly. Also, there's a limited number of things you can do in Google Slides, so the options are somewhat simple and limited. Okay, so here's a simple workflow. So I'm gonna put together one of the graphs one of the slides that I showed you guys previously. So the first thing we did as a team was put together what the modeling inputs would look like in Google Sheets. And this helped our modeler understand what we were trying to model, and it also, just communicated to the broader team what we were trying to do. Next, the modeler went into IES and then put all of their outputs into a sheet that we could then reference. Next, we hopped on a Google call where we compared all the different things that we can do and tried to brainstorm what we thought the deliverable should look like. And then we put together a draft. So this was one of the first drafts of the image that you're probably familiar with now. We didn't end up liking these graphs on the bottom, but we had that idea of having those metrics in different colors, and then had the idea of some kind of icon demonstrating each of the changes that we wanted to make. Next, we looked at this slide critically and tried to make it better. And we did that via making comments on the slide and also hopped back on a meet to discuss. We then decided to ditch this idea of trying to show everything on the building and instead wanted to create these diagrams on more of a system level. So we had these draft images pop up in Google Slides as well. We also got feedback from the mechanical engineer on the project on the plant sizing. You can't see it in this one, it's hard to screenshot these, but basically all these little triangles that represent comments that they put in here about system sizing. Next, we tried to draft all these different symbols that would then eventually, contribute to each of those little components in the system that we were describing. Next, this was what the final slide looked like. So we were happy with this product. And then ultimately, we ended up adding the table at the back from the original modeling output sheet. And then we delivered it to the client, also in Google Slides. All right, so now to the fun part, maybe, hopefully. I'll show you guys how to create some of those illustrations in Google Slides. So first we'll talk about some formatting tips and tricks. You can use guides in Google Slides similar to how you have them, in my experience, in InDesign. When you come into Google Slides, you'll have guides in the middle of your diagram automatically. And then you can also make these guides by just dragging down from the ruler. You can also create guides within your theme. Sorry, I went a little too far ahead. But so I clicked edit and then went to the theme, and then these guides will stay in place. So you won't be able to move those again. Next, we can look at another kind of theme, which is a color theme. So when you want to change the color, you can pick your company's theme. And the first time that you're doing this, you'll probably want to create your color theme from your company's color scheme. So I've pulled up our website, and then I'm just going to click and drag colors from each of those options. You can also input just hexagonal color codes if you've got those written down. All right, moving on. Another way to kind of templatize and make your work look consistent is by using themes. So after you create one presentation with a template, you can import it into your next presentation, which can be really helpful, when you're working with coworkers and trying to make everything look consistent. So that'll import your color theme that we just did, and then also your guides and fonts and all of that. All right. This one's kind of a silly one. I'm sure you're familiar and comfortable with doing move, copy, paste. But just as a tip trick, so you can center things on the page by using those red guidelines. And then you can also copy things from different pages. Let's see. So let's say I wanted to copy this project schedule that I had created for another project directly into my new presentation. I can just copy all of it and then paste it, and it'll come in directly as it was in that previous slide. So there's really nothing more that you need to do. You can also link some graphs. So if you've got some data from Google Sheets, for example, you can bring in that data and reference it in real time. And that means also that when you change the graph in Google Sheets, you can automatically update it in your Google Slides format. All right. Okay, here's the real fun part. So here we'll look at starting to draw some stuff in Google Slides. So here are a few of the kind of introductory type objects that we can drive, that we can draw. Right now I'm looking at the drawing tools, and I'll zoom in on a few and show you how I put some of these objects together. So you can do a scribble, which basically means you can just draw whatever you want, and that can be helpful for things like wires that you don't want to look very consistent. You can also do straight lines with a polyline, and then hold down Shift to make sure that it stays orthogonal or that it has a specific angle associated with it. Then you can add an arrowhead like that. And then change the color to be something in your theme. Not sure which one's going on here. Okay, yeah, that's fun. So Google Slides also has some built-in symbols that can be helpful. So I didn't even need to do anything to this one. It was just right there for me to use. There are also some equation tools. So you can use the brackets like this, just directly from the equation section in the. Let's do a more fun one. Okay, yeah. So here, using a triangle. So again, you can use the polygon tool to draw shapes that are not inherent in Google Slides. You can also use lines versus fill. So in this case, I made the fill empty and then made the thickness of the lines pretty significant and drew it in that way. And then for the center thing, I think I ended up using a rectangle instead. So I'll skip ahead to that. But then made the fill act as the negative space, and then the made the line act as the negative space, and the fill was the solid space there. All right. Here's some more fun drawings. So we looked at this slide just a minute ago, and I'll show you now how to make those rounded rectangles that act as weights in this case. So first making that CO2 cloud, so you can get a rounded rectangle and then increase the radius of the ends. And then you can add some circles on top. And then write CO2 in front of it. I'll jump ahead to our next one. So did another rounded rectangle, but this time just on the top. And then use the line instead of the fill here again and increase the thickness of it for the handle. Okay, moving on to a light bulb. So using a circle and then a few rectangles, put them all together. And again here, using the outline of the rectangles as the negative space between the light bulb components. And then this bottom piece is again another rounded rectangle on the bottom. I think you get the idea. So I'll move along to the last one that we'll draw, which is a boiler. So whenever I'm drawing, more complicated mechanical equipment, I like to look online but to better understand what the kind of salient features are of this product. So in this one, I'm seeing a lot of flues at the top of the gas boilers, and so I decided that was a salient feature that I wanted to include. There also, it seems like a few of them are standing up on little legs, so I included those as well. And then they all have some kind of meter in front. And then I added the gas icon to be just really obvious. So let's see, after I picked an image, went into Google Slides and brought in that image and just drew on top of it. So simplifying it as much as you can. I started out with a can of this rounded rectangle on both sides, but it ended up being too rounded. So then I instead brought in some half rounded rectangles here and on the bottom and added them to a rectangle. And now I'm making the blue, so I did a trapezoid, and that little yellow piece is where you can increase or decrease the angle of the trapezoid. I'll skip ahead here because I think you guys have seen some of this stuff, but we'll look at the flame. So these are moon shapes. And then, so if you start kind of rotating them and playing with the angles at which they are drawn, you can eventually, create some kind of flame shape. You can also rotate them. So flipping it horizontally can get your moon shape to be facing the other direction. And then kind of keep rotating it and try to keep a consistent line at the bottom here. And then ultimately, I think I copied one, onto the front and changed it a little bit. And then just kind of played with it until it looked right to me. Here I'm going in and just making sure that those lines are consistent between those two pieces that I built together. And then let's see. Okay, the last thing you want to do is just group everything together. And then you can size it all down. And when you group things, it just makes sure that when you grab it, it all moves as one object as opposed to several objects. Okay, so in summary, it's important to focus on visual communication so that the work that your team has performed can be well demonstrated and well communicated to the client in the short amount of time that you have to prove your point. And then we looked at a number of tools that you can use to improve your presentations and your graphics. And then we also looked at Google Slides and kind of the Google Suite in general as a way to help get you there. So here's some resources that you can use. So, I mean, my favorite one is just Google. Like I'll look for if there's a boiler icon. Some people like the Noun Project. That's a good place to look for icons, but I prefer Google just because it's got everything. So you can start by looking at icons, or you can start by looking for just the actual image itself. I also like to collect a repository of inspiration images. So this is one that I liked. So I just have a document with a bunch of links in it to stuff that I've liked that maybe I can reference in the future. And then of course we've got Project StaSIO, where you can look at a bunch of work. I think I've submitted maybe 3 or 4 images at this point that are up there. And I know that there are a lot of up there that has inspired me as well. Okay, so happy to answer some questions. I think the best way to handle this would be for you to raise your hand and then Nick will call on you. I'm happy to do any live demos as well. So if you're like, how do I make this image into a circle? I'm happy to do that. So feel free to just throw them at me and I'll see what I can do.
Awesome, wonderful. Thank you so much, Kate. That's very informative and kind of mind-blowing, to be honest, that, what I admire about in reviewing your winning submission was purely just the simplistic icons associated with it. And while it's just so simple in nature, I think it's a lot of times they're hard to get and hard to convey in kind of in a uniform capacity when you have a lot of them. So really kind of creating them in a simplistic manner that you did is effective, and it's simple and concise, and that's kind of like that's the main goal, right? You're trying to convey very complex information in a very simplistic manner.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, and I think too, it's important. Like we're not. Well, some of you are architects. I'm not an architect, but like I think we don't necessarily have the time yet to create these like really detailed, beautiful illustrations. So like if you can just get the idea across with like the most simple thing, then that's a great place to start in my mind.
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. Let's see. Looks like we got a couple questions here. If I can. unmute. Matt, are you able to unmute? If not,
Yeah, I think I'm okay.
there
you
we
hear me?
go. Perfect. Yeah.
All right. Great presentation. This is really just awesome information. I put a question in the chat, but then you answered it already about the icons and illustrations. Could you go back to creating templates for future use?
Yes.
That was, I think, an interesting part that you kind of went through kind of quickly.
For sure. Yeah, so Google Slides has built in a few themes, so you can import any of those, and then if you've created one before, you can import one of your own instead. So here's how you would do that, and then you can insert it as well.
So those themes are
If you
built
wanted-
into previous previous slide decks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's some that are native to Google Slides, and then there are some that you can build on your own and use for other presentations. And this is how you would edit your theme. So let's say you have a text that you use company-wide. Oh, that was fast, you're right. Let's say you have a text that you want to use company-wide. You can change your template slide, and then once you, here we go, this will be more fun.
Just fire it up. There we go.
Yeah. So I haven't worked on my themes too much, but so after you have a theme in here, the power of them is that you can bring in like all these different template slides. So let's say you and your coworkers are all collaborating, like you'll have consistent looking text. It'll start in the same spot on each slide. So that's the kind of power of them. And then let's look at just the actual theme itself as well. So here, you can also put in like your company logo. So let's say I'm gonna just do this really quickly, but I'll copy this image and then paste it in here. So now that image will be on every slide. So
And
ta-da,
could you
for
quickly
example.
hit on the color themes component of that too? Where was that?
Sure.
That in the
Yeah,
theme.
so the color
itself?
theme. So they live together. So if you import
Okay.
a theme, it'll have both your color theme and your like slide template theme, but you edit them in a different way. So let's say I've got some text here. You can change your color here. So these are the ones that are already built into my theme. And then if I wanted to edit those, I would click that little edit tool and then edit one of those here.
Oh, nice.
How did I do, Matt?
Awesome. Thank you.
Great,
Wonderful.
you're welcome.
All right. Joshua?
Yeah, hello. Did I unmute okay, I think?
Yep, perfect.
Thank you. That was awesome. I can't believe that was all Google and just in docs like that. My question kind of is like Matt's, it's about using templates, but is there any way to like reuse the same presentation like as a dashboard per se if you have like a population of kind of the same things like in Power BI you could use like a slicer and just have it like cycle to a new database and use that same.
Oh,
So instead
I
of
see what you mean.
a
Okay.
template for to reuse and start a new project, could I just keep
Yeah.
cycling new data underneath it and reuse that in a way?
So it's not as straightforward as what you would do in Power BI. However, like if I had, let me just pull something up. So if I had a chart like this and I wanted to just reuse the same slide, what I would do is I would like copy this chart onto the page again, and then just size it kind of appropriately. So it's not, you can't, let's say like you've got this link chart, you can't change the source of the
Gotcha.
chart right now.
Uh-huh.
But what you can use is kind of that same format and resize things to be identical, I guess.
Thank you very much. You've enumerated something I've said forever is nobody cares I made an energy model. They just want some confidence in an answer.
Exactly.
I hope that people start caring.
Yeah, I really like how you laid out just all of the amount of work for, that 1 hour meeting, and maybe within that meeting, you get 10 minutes of time to deliver all of that work.
Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Thank you. Justin?
Hey, Kate, how's it going? So something that stood out to me immediately was so much of this is tools that you're using with such a clear vision. In other words, the use of a white border while keeping the fill to the power button was like, whoa, like my brain like flipped when it did that. I was like, that's such a really, unique way of thinking about it. So I guess my question for you is more about that vision, that kind of graphic artist nature that you got from such a young age is so clear in how you make such simple graphics using just such simple elements. Like, I think the thing that started with me is anyone could do this in PowerPoint as well. We have a lot of the same tools, but your vision of how it's going to look or how these things can basically combine to make simple graphics stood out as one of the most impressive aspects of this presentation. So I guess my question to you is, how do we start developing some of that vision too? Is it just looking at Project StaSIO, those examples, or do you have any required reading that we might be able to do to kind of help spiff up our own graphic performance?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not sure. I don't have a ton of like required reading, but I think I guess my ethos is how can we like both simplify things and like just be creative about what it is that we're trying to show. So instead of like trying to, I guess, represent something in its totality, like what are sort of the key elements that we need to bring into it to get it to look like what we want it to, I guess. And like, are there things in Google Slides or in PowerPoint, whatever you're using, that can help us get there? I think the other aspect of it that you brought up, yeah, is just like creativity and vision. I think that's not something that we really think about as our job, maybe. And so I think it's just important for us to kind of reintroduce that back into the conversation and try to make it playful, familiar, educational. I think it's hard for me to talk about because, like, to a certain extent, as you're describing it, it does kind of come naturally to me, like being from the kind of artist and graphic designer background. But if anybody else has a better answer to Justin's question, like, please jump in.
Yeah, I think you said it well. I mean, a lot of it too is kind of, as you indicated, having that inspiration, but there's still the kind of that gap missing of, okay, I have my data, I know kind of the intent of kind of how I want to deliver it, but it's even too kind of in the minutia of the like even the icons, for example. Like, how do I, getting to the design thinking of creating simplistic graphics that go into your final vision is kind of the hard part. So I what I think is helpful for, at least for myself, it's just looking at the inspiration of the overall kind of final deliverable, but then kind of even stepping back and thinking of even kind of smaller icons or graphs that go into that final deliverable. And someone put in the chat that author Edward Tufte. Yeah, I bought a few of his books. One of them is Visual Explanations. I'll put the Amazon link for. He does a really good job of kind of quantifying and saying exactly what we're talking about here, of like detailed analytical data and trying to convey it in a sense that makes sense and that's effective. This is one book that I put in the chat there that I had bought recently. It's good. It's technical, but it's thorough in explaining kind of the way of visualizations. I saw that there was another one in there, Stephen Few. I haven't seen any of his books, but yeah, it looks like, I'm just kind of looking it up, he has the same logic. Yeah, the Now You See It one is the one I'm looking at. It looks good. Wonderful.
I look forward to reading those too. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, this is awesome. In your resources slide, the one above there, 56, what is that decarbonization of visual catalyst? So is that a individual repository, or is that just a component that you maybe have pulled from?
Yeah, that's just something that I liked in my kind of inspiration repository. Let me try not to show you guys all of my.
Yeah.
Let's see, that's dump. There we go. That's not it. Here's that one. I'll post a link in the chat. Yeah, I just thought this was really interesting. It talked about how the different states are trying to decarbonize and how much progress they've made towards those goals. But yeah, I think it's also helpful for inspiration, not necessarily from our field, but just curious to see how people are putting together their data in other fields as well. Well, thanks for the good questions, you guys.
Yeah, no, this is good. If you want to maybe put the AIA
yes, good idea.
kind of sign up either in the chat or the QR code again.
I did. Yeah, I posted a link in the chat, and I'll put it up one more time for everybody.
Perfect. All right. Does anyone else have any other questions for Kate or the?
Looks like Enough had a question, I think.
Oh, no. Go ahead.
Hi guys, can you hear me well?
Yep.
Yeah.
Hi. So this is Anoop. I'm joining from Canada from SMS Engineering. So great presentation, Kate. I think we always overlook this particular part, which makes the maximum impact when we are sitting in a client presentation like that. I think for the big firms, it does make sense to possibly have a dedicated individual who is well versed with the skills to make this happen. In your opinion, do you think the energy modelers should take out time to actually take this up as a part in their overall exercise, or maybe it's more beneficial if you have a dedicated individual in a firm who is tidying up all of these presentations just because he has done it over and over again? And sorry,
Yeah,
second part of my question is, I think you certainly do have a very specific skill set here because you do have a graphic design experience. At the same time, you are well versed with the mechanical and electrical aspects of what goes into our kind of work. So you do have that good connect of what should actually be a part of the presentation to make the maximum impact. Not every energy modeler will have that skill, or a graphic designer will have the other part of skills, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad that you brought up that second point as well, because I think both are really important. I don't necessarily, I would not call myself the most proficient energy modeler. I'm familiar with energy modeling, but I certainly at my firm have taken on more of the role right now of coalescing the information that other people are putting together. But you're right in that it does take a certain amount of understanding of what that information is. So I think there's a happy medium. I think we need people who have, somewhat of a technical background to do this kind of stuff. But I think that's an ongoing conversation at Cyclone as well, of do we need each of the energy modelers to be able to create stuff like this? Is it templates? Can we kind of automate it? What does it look like? And I think so far the answer that we've come up with is the power behind all of these visualizations is that they are really unique and they're project specific, and so we don't feel like templatizing them would be the best way to go right now. So me and my colleague Jason Sipple at Cyclone, we're kind of the ones who are putting together the visualizations right now, and we call ourselves the bridgers. We're bringing all the other teams together. So I do think that that's kind of what we've landed on right now, and I think we're probably wanting to bring in some other people to help do that as well, as as both of us take on other things at the company as well. So I think it's a mix of things, and I'm curious to hear, if your company has figured something out. I think maybe AEI, I feel like they have like medical illustrators, which isn't quite the same thing, but they have people who are dedicated to drawing things. So I kind of wonder if, maybe our field one day will have people who are more dedicated to the communication side and more people who are dedicated to the technical side.
Awesome.
That's a good way to put it too, because in developing graphics and maybe trying to get assistance in helping kind of collate some of this information and make additional graphics. There's been a request for like, let's try to standardize this. Let's try to make templates where we can just can this information. And I've taken the approach to try to do it a few times. And like you said, it is hard because it's unique. You're looking to solve maybe a different problem. You're looking at a whole different building typology that it's hard to kind of can graphics in a sense, and then there's it's just unique in every way. So it's a good point, and it's tough because a lot of the energy modelers either some may not have a desire or willingness to kind of go above and beyond and create these graphics. They're maybe more focused on the energy model or in your model itself. There's people that have different aptitudes to creating graphics, and obviously you and yourself are very, very good at communicating it and showcasing that information in a pleasant manner. So it's good. I like it.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I think you're making me think as well. Like, we do hire people, to be energy modelers and to be technical people, and I think that's great.
Right.
I think the other way that we could look at it is like maybe we could start bringing in, more people who are trained in architecture backgrounds or like, in kind of communication type backgrounds, because it does take, both sides of it essentially.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. Like, you're in a good position because you have the understanding of the information. You understand kind of what technically is kind of being conveyed, but you also have that skill set of kind of the graphical mindset that can help deliver it in a quick manner too, right? There's kind of a level of efficiency and how fast that data can be kind of transitioned into something that can be seen by the layman. So
Totally.
Yeah, and just to kind of like add on to the current conversation, I've been able to kind of engage with the visual side, and I found that it makes me a better technical engineer. Just understanding like what types of information has the most impact on the client and what questions are they asking that I haven't yet calc'd, helps me focus my time on bigger impact.
that's a good point. That's a very good point.
Yeah. Thanks, Atisa.
I have a quick question as well.
Yeah.
Have you explored including animations or any motion graphics to your Google Slides, and how do you typically embed those into your presentation?
One animation that we played with in Google Slides that we didn't end up using was bringing in different rows of a table at a time, which is a super basic way to think about animation. But I did, just now we were looking at videos and I was sort of pausing them and that sort of thing, as opposed to having an animation that sort of went like continuously. And I prefer that method, I think, to having a visualization that you can't necessarily pause, because I feel like just as you're starting to understand one frame, it switches. So I think it's important to still be able to focus. And I guess like I have very minimal experience in Power BI, but from what I saw in Power BI, that it is really powerful in its ability to animate. But I think that it's also important, for us to be able to narrow in on what we want to show the client, as opposed to saying like, this is all the data and we can animate it to show this. So I think that there's a power in both, but I haven't necessarily found the balance that I'm looking for with animations yet.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just recently for the Project StaSIO annual competition, kind of accepting video submissions as well as animations as well. So in the most previous competition, there were a few GIFs were submitted, and we together we kind of found them very unique because again, it's an easier way to kind of show maybe different iterations or kind of different levels of impact in a different capacity, and we found them to be pretty insightful. But again, then you can run the issue of you're trying to really hone in on, okay, what's the effect of this, and then it goes to the next frame, right? And so it's a good point about the videos itself, because you can really kind of stop it, hone in on it, understand it, and then go to the next one. Cool. Any other questions? Looks like no one has a hand up. Well, with that being said, Kate, do you have anything else?
No, thank you so much for having me, and thanks everybody for coming.
Yeah.
I'll drop my email in the chat in case you guys have any questions. But you're also welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Kate, for your time and the wonderful presentation. And thank you, everyone, for joining and listening in. A recording of this will be available, and we will try to probably publish something on the website or the YouTube channel. But stay tuned. The next year's annual competition is open. We are accepting submissions, so if you or you know anyone that has some good graphics that's worthy of some submission, and hopefully be a winner like Kate. So thank you so much for everyone for joining.
Thanks for organizing.